Welcome, everybody. Good morning to those that are in the United States on that part of the world, and good afternoon to those that are in the European side or Asia Pac. It's always a pleasure to share some of my research, and I thank Worksoft for giving me this opportunity. So as it was just introduced, we're going to be talking about continuous testing trends, and the intersection with automation, with the requirement of more automation, and so forth. But before we dive into some of these more technical trends around testing and continuous testing that I've been researching now for quite some time, why is it that we are, so interested in automation? Why is it that we're seeing what we're seeing happening in the IT, in the world of digital, right? And well, the biggest trend that we see, and from the Forrester perspective, and we've been writing research around this now for quite some time, is that we have to be we have to be customer obsessed. And I always like to put up this slide with Jeff Bezos. He's probably one of the most customer obsessed CEOs that I know, or that we could all know and see, and we can feel that, right, when we are working, when we are using and leveraging Amazon services, AWS, the support they give, and they really do work backwards, as Jeff says, from in thinking about what they deliver and what they deploy and how they put together the services. It's all outside in from the customers. Now, what does it mean really to be customer obsessed? Well, as I said, we've been doing this research for quite some time in Forrester, and it's really four things. We think there's four main principles for customer obsession. One is customer obsessed organizations, wake up in the morning, they go to work, and they are really customer led. It means they prioritize their initiatives on the customer, trying to make as big as impact as possible on the customer, positively, of course. And they don't just know the customer, but they know also what the customer will want also later on. So they do things like customer journey mapping, persona design work. They celebrate initiatives that are improving the customer experience. Customer experience becomes a very important metric to measure. They are insights driven, meaning that they actively review, ethnographic and do a lot of customer research, customer data that is quantitative, and that they leverage that to that drives, what the plannings and the products that they build. They instrument the offerings with those insights, and they use a test and learn. They do a lot of experimentation and testing of new ways of delivering services. They are fast, and I'll come back to that in a minute, and they are connected. Connected means, they do integrate both technical and business into product teams. There's a lot of alignment between, marketing, CMO, and the IT CIO, which usually, used to be siloed and very little collaboration. They embrace design thinking as a common language and a common framework, a common approach across all the organizations, and they are very, of course, cloud first as a strategy. Now let's look at fast, because that's really, the one key point that I want to talk about today. And yes, but I want to add another thing, because we're here to talk about testing and quality. And so really, while it's okay to say that they must be fast, it's really fast with quality, right? It's at what I call quality at speed. And so the principle of fast is really, how do you become fast with quality? Well, of course, it is accelerating the adoption of agile methodologies, but it's also about embracing continuous testing. It's embracing a new way of testing that aligns very well with the DevOps philosophy, that has to support the DevOps philosophy and the tooling and the continuous integration and the continuous delivery that we talk about. To be faster, yes, there's also this trend of introducing more and more low-code development and testing platforms for that reason, and also a lot of automation efficiencies. We see, the growth of automation. Automation is something that is that everybody is aspiring to do more and more, especially with the advent of AI and machine learning. And last but not least is they really, change the governance around how to fund these initiatives, how to change and update plans continuously, and everything is based on customer insights. So, these are just some high-level ideas of how a customer-obsessed organization tries to, basically change the technology team culture to become fast with quality. Now, of course, we can't avoid not speaking about the times we're all in, COVID. And so what we did is we do a lot of research, being Forrester, a lot of data that we look and analyze. And we've got these technographic surveys that go out to thousands and thousands of purchase influencers, of developers or leaders, depending which type of survey we're doing. But so what we also did is we just looked at the data that we had from at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, and we compared it with a survey that we ran, the same surveys with some specific questions that we did during COVID in April, May 22, to see have the priorities shift and moved around. And interestingly enough, well, some things did not change or actually accelerated, right? And one business impact, one business priority that accelerated is the shift to digital business. What didn't change much, which is good. I mean, at least it remained unchanged, right? People might think that, oh my God, COVID is here. We are really, there are companies, of course, that are going into the stage that we call like survival mode rather than adaptive or growth. Those in survival probably are looking at where they need to cut a lot of ongoing investments. But basically, for most of the organizations, the unchanged priorities are in the objectives of whatever growth they had in mind, the change of business model, the improvement of employee experience, the ability to innovate. Those remained almost unchanged priorities. And what they did lower as a priority is work around trying to be more differentiating, the experience with partners, investing less in partners, regulations, and wherever they could avoid investing in more regulatory requirements seem to be areas of lower priorities. From an IT perspective, there's been, of course, a bigger focus on cutting IT costs. We say smartly, but of course sometimes that doesn't always happen. But of course everybody wants to do more with less during these days. Continuously updating the IT roadmap to be adaptive, basically to reflect ongoing shifts in business strategy and priorities. This can be positive. It can be, it's basically, think about all those that found themselves in some industries like retail, where online exploded suddenly, right? And so that had a big impact on the supply chain. From an unchanged priority perspective, on the IT side, the adoption of Agile, DevOps, deliver faster, this is something that everybody told us, well, still moving on with these plans, with the transformation plans in these areas. And where they started again, looks like the partners area is one of the areas where things became of lower priority, managing partners and suppliers. Last but not least, the technology initiatives, what increased was the interest in, okay, I want to leverage my IT infrastructure, make it better, make sure that I can support, think about all that remote working going on, invest in digital experience technologies, open API and microservices. It looks like, the responses say these are areas that we want to invest more in. Increase and use of cloud, and from an IT perspective remained kind of an unchanged priority, and upgrading, replacing or consolidating business application systems and shifting focus from front-end systems of engagement to systems of record remained, basically was of a lower priority. But when you look at automation, the interesting thing, we also did this research during COVID. What we found out is that, we all saw this move and shift into we're all working from home. And so we did this specific research around the digital process automation. And one key question we were asking, this is a research that my colleague Rob Koblowitz did, is what technologies are used to manage and automate business processes within your organization, and which ones depended on paper which of your processes depend on a paper-based process, and it looks like 46 plus 24, that's 70% basically have a process that depends on paper, which is a big impediment, especially when everybody's out of the office. And these processes do exist, of course, right? So basically, remote work, work broke a business process that people had to execute for supporting their business. And so that's kind of just supporting the trend that we've been seeing now for quite some time, where automation, RPA, the different types of automation that I'm going to talk a little bit about, has been a big growth area, right? We know that's a growth area, and it remains to be a growth area, projected growth area out of COVID. But when we talk about automation, really, it's a pretty complex landscape. There's very different types of automation. There's things like digital process automation, which can be deep and wide, and these are tools that help designed to handle sophisticated, long-running processes, designed to drive wide-scale process automation including design, orchestration, monitoring of process, most of these DPA tools will end up using and coordinating service level tracking, content managing, a high number of capabilities, right? They utilize multiple intelligent automation technologies. That's what a DPA tool, a digital process automation technology would do. Dynamic case management comes next, and dynamic case management is really designed to manage, again, complex ad hoc but it's more human-centric and document-centric, which requires collaboration around documents and coordination, including archiving and retention. So that's another form of interesting automation that we're seeing organizations adopt. And then robotic process automation, which is probably more common, which is designed to automate human tasks and orchestrate and handle more comprehensive processes and tasks, steps. In general, it's kind of seen as an integration driven, right, from the client, which provides simple integration by coordinating different actions between multiple systems. And then you've got the AI-infused applications, right? These are applications that are embedding, machine learning, are embedding rule-based, they are embedding reasoning. Think about a chatbot, that's an AI-infused application, or think about an application that speaks, sees, can make decisions. And that automates even more, all the way to low-code platforms. And then there is another domain of automation, which is testing, test automation. It's, it's a process on its own. It's a business process on its own, if you will, from an IT perspective. But the interesting thing is that it actually intersects all the others, because end-to-end, test automation and testing can be used to test all the other types of automation that we have here. And so basically, the other thing that we see happening is that customers really want to create these customer journeys, right, to provide a great customer experience. And usually the customer experience is just the tip of the iceberg that everybody sees. It's a system of engagement. That's where we've innovated with Agile, DevOps, Cloud, CI, CD, but also the new technologies being applied. But really the end-to-end customer journey, the customer experience is also based on what's in the back end, the supply chain, the vendor management, the logistics, the banking core system, the core. And the core is the area where we haven't done much innovation or not enough innovation. And usually we keep, the old way of working there, waterfall, siloed legacy. And what happens is that really we're not able to leverage a great customer experience for clients. So we create what I call digital illusion. And so we've done, yes, a pretty good job of innovating on the front end, but we really need to do more in terms of updating, modernizing the back end, and making sure that now we can really, really provide better customer experience, which is not just, adding in front of something a mobile application, because that doesn't differentiate much. And so basically what this turns out to be is, from a testing perspective, if you look at a complete customer journey, right, what we're talking about is a huge different number of technologies that you need to be dealing with. You have to deal with web, you have to deal with mobile, you have to deal with packaged apps, you have to deal with custom built apps, you have to deal with with cloud. You have to deal with cloud that can be public or private or hybrid. The amount of different technologies and archetypes of and patterns is huge. The heterogeneity of the pipelines is huge, and we have to deal with that level of testing, which is not easy. So what do we do about that? Well, basically, there's a number of things, but from an automation perspective, focusing a bit on building more and more automation, the most obvious thing that I see, unfortunately, not enough focus on is, well, you're building that automation, you have to test that automation. Of course, there's other best practices that organizations have to follow, that is understanding what you might need to really automate and what not, but also understand the technology that helps you automate the right thing. Use frameworks to determine both which areas can be automated with what. In this 9 criteria framework that we defined in Forrester, there's an interesting, one of the criteria is focusing on the robotic quotient. What is the robotic quotient? The robotic quotient is basically the ability of an organization to have people that can sit side by side with bots, can manage bots, can collaborate with bots, can collaborate, understand AI, have the skills. And that's very important to be able to be successful in this new world of automation. And then put together the right teams, which are a combination of the right business people first, and then technology to help them and support them. Just doing one or the other is not the right thing to do, because we know that, business needs the help of IT, of the technology management, to support what they're doing and what they're delivering in production. And what's very important is you need to test your automation. And so the question is really, what type of test automation, what type of testing to test that automation? It's really all about the end-to-end testing, right? End-to-end testing is what's supporting this overall modernization from back end to front end, and where we really need to start thinking about not just working and testing and developing and testing the front end, but also going all the way back to whatever is on the systems of record side, and treat that as an end-to-end test, right? With all the different technologies, with all the different complexities that will come in that end-to-end process. And so, the question is that sounds challenging, and it is, because if you even look at how much automation we've been able to achieve so far, and this is out of my Agile at Scale survey that I do every 2 years, you can see that the percent of improving functional test automation and unit test automation. Well, unit testing is automated by default. It just says that people don't unit test all of the tests that they build. But the automation is not growing much. It's kind of plateaued around 50%, 35% in some areas when it's non-functional. And if you look at the other data point, we ask about, how's your, how much do you test from a manual perspective? That data point is not decreasing much too. So we definitely can and must do better for achieving higher levels of automation. And one way to do that is through continuous testing, which is, this is a report that I wrote, the 12 must-dos for achieving continuous software testing, which basically says, you really need to change. You need to change not just the technology, but it's mostly about new practices, new skills, a new organizational structure, right? Using some of the new practices, shifting testing to the left, but also testing in production, or having visibility into what's happening in production, replacing more and more manual with exploratory testing, doing TDD or BDD, new ways of creating tests and automating them. Having a federated organization, a test center where testers are embedded into the cross-functional teams, using common metrics. And then there's the whole technology area, where we need to focus more on automation, but also, address the fact that our infrastructure is going to become more, or the backend might be becoming more microservice oriented, be integrated in a CI/CD and version control platform, adopt new technologies, and automate the test data management process and provision test environments quickly. There's a whole lot of things under that label of continuous testing that has to happen to support that end-to-end testing in those complex environments, as we spoke. And if you look at it from technology perspective, what are the specific capabilities that we need for continuous test automation? These are some of the criteria that I carved out from my wave that I published last week on continuous functional test automation, which Worksoft was also a part of. You can see that on one side, we want these tools to be able to address that omni-channel of webs, of bots, of mobile, of desktop, of custom software, packaged apps, right? There's a lot of different heterogeneous technologies and architectures that need to be, application architectures that need to be tested. But it's not just about automating everything, really ruthless. We were talking about ruthless automation, but it's really more smart automation. Can we do it smartly so that we don't waste time on automating unnecessary parts or running automation on regressions that might not be impacted by a change? It's about shifting to the left and not just functional testing, but also the non-functional testing. It's about leveraging more testing personas, not just development personas, but also the business and the technical testing persona. Sorry, not just the technical tester, but also business testers and as well as developer testers. It's about leveraging what the technology is giving us, AI and insights, to add that word smart to testing. It's about a well-integrated continuous software delivery lifecycle. Testing is a first-class citizen in that lifecycle. And of course, where possible, it's leveraging cloud, Docker, Kubernetes, microservices architecture, containers, especially when you look at modernizing that backend system. That's going to be a must to go through. But the biggest interesting data point that comes out is that I ask clients, would you take a best of breed approach for each type of testing? We know there's many types of testing that people need to do. I just touched on a few of them. With various capabilities, would you use best of breed versus an integrated suite, a platform that I can go there and I find and I can have a consistent experience across the different type of testers? And the answer was 72% prefer a unified platform, right, with as many integrated functionalities as possible and providing a great user tester experience that cuts across those different personas and helps them collaborate, because it's not just going to be one of those testing personas testing, but more of them. So a few more minutes on automation. There's this use of AI in testing, which is one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is really, how can we test these AI-infused applications? So the first one is all about testing, leveraging AI to do better testing. And really what's happening in this space is creating bots. It's creating AI bots that are not replacing testers, but it's actually, they are augmenting testers to do things in a much more smarter way. They are the developer testers, the technical testers, and the business testers. They are all being augmented. There's a level of abstraction that is, rising with AI and machine learning, as you will see probably in what Worksoft is going to demo, that makes it easier for even a business and a technical tester to do more complicated things that would normally require a developer behind the scene, right? Instead, there's a bot there helping. And that's one thing that's happening from leveraging AI into the testing space. And I wrote this report that the path to autonomous testing is augmenting human testers first. On the other hand, there's the issue of, but we're all building these new AI applications. How can we test those? And that's actually a huge topic. I just am bringing it up here to kind of share that I have done a part 1 research into this. And the good news is that 80% of the testing of an AI-infused application, which is an application that is made on one side of traditional software, and on the other side, there will be some autonomous software embedded in, providing different capabilities. And testing all of that really means 80% of what we know about testing can be applied with the technologies that we know, but there's a 20% that requires very specific, and it's a hard problem to solve, which is, how do I test an AI-generated experience? And that's my part 2 of research that I'm working on right now. On the other hand, there's also, other automation that needs to be tested as well. We're all using RPA to build new applications, to build new, to automate business processes. And the question is, there's also this question is, which automation should I use for what? And, my recommendation is test automation tools have the right things that can help you test your RPA solutions as you build these business processes. Don't deploy directly in production without testing, because I see that happening, but it's happening and it's working only because you're probably doing some very simple tasks. The moment you want to scale and make more complex automation, if you don't test them, believe me, you're going to have a lot of trouble. And so this research explains how test automation, how the technologies, what we know on the testing side, can help build better RPA solutions. And it also explains what's in common between those platforms in terms of capabilities, because there are some, there is an intersection between the two. But the point really I want to make is that you can use RPA tools to build RPA capabilities to build RPA solutions, but use test capabilities to test what you build with those RPA platforms. So, in a nutshell, testing is actually even, evolving continuously. I was talking about agile testing. I've been talking about DevOps and testing. We've been talking about continuous testing. And, now we're talking about smart testing. And you're going to see more, more innovation coming, and testing will have to keep to evolve. So we're going to have to modernize software testing with continuous testing. You're going to have to make sure you have the right engineering capabilities, whether in-house or coming from outside. We have to, plan for testing also the automation that we build, and not just the traditional software that we've been building or the older software that exists there for regression testing. But we need to prepare for all this automation coming and how we test that automation. And last but not least is look for the right partners from a technology perspective, from a services perspective, if you need any. Because of course, as I say, it's a people, process, and technology, and I like putting technology last, but when it comes to automation, technology might make the difference. Anyway, so that's what I wanted to share. So I will hand it back so that Chris can go on with his part. Thank you.
That was a great presentation and gave me some interesting things to think about as the future of testing. And obviously, it's exciting. That's why I do this as a product manager. So before you freak out, yes, the last time Diego and I presented, we talked about today's modern applications, houses or cities, because I think this is a great analogy we've been using for a couple of years. And so if you think about a house, you have a blueprint, you have a lot, you have a structure you're going to build, you're going to hook it up to existing services, water, electricity, and internet. And this is really how we build custom applications. And a lot of times it's a small custom applications, an increment. We're leveraging things that exist, like building materials and electricity and such. Now, if you think about enterprise applications are connected across multiple things, right? They're usually very elaborate in what they do. They connect multiple systems. You pass data between them. Well, this is really like rebuilding a city. Cities have multiple neighborhoods. You have multiple streets. You have power in that. And the interesting thing is you can't rebuild or reclaim parts of a city and turn it off to do it. You have to do it while the city is still running. And what we find with these big end-to-end applications, and so we upgrade Salesforce, you upgrade SAP, these enterprise applications, you have to upgrade them while you're still running a version, while you're still running your city itself. And so this is where we really want to focus on end-to-end testing and how it's different for simple things like building a house versus reclaiming a city itself. So if you look at enterprise applications today, there's a huge increase in the expectation from the business users. They want things to be beautiful like consumer apps and work really well. And quite honestly, there's a lot of complex technology that we're integrating in these landscapes with these different applications. So there's a much greater importance on the user experience and response time and quality. And people are moving and converting to agile and DevOps-oriented processes to deliver these as increments. Now, the interesting thing is Diego really talked about speed, and we want speed with quality, because speed without quality isn't helpful, right? But we've looked at these large SaaS applications and started saying, hey, companies say they have an average 123 of these SaaS applications, and they do 3 upgrades a year. Therefore, we're talking about 369 upgrades a year. That means as one component changes, we still need to make sure it works with the other components. Just like the city, we can't shut off the water and expect other things to work. So when we think about the velocity of business applications today, people are saying they are upgrading faster. Okay, and I borrowed this great slide from Diego, where he really does talk about how continuous testing is the underpinning of the DevOps lifecycle, right? And a lot of people say, well, we've moved to the cloud. The cloud has simplified the IT. We're getting things faster there. But really, the whole point is to get new functionality in the hands of users that they can use. And we want to do this in an unprecedented rate. Well, the fear is, what happens when these wheels start turning too fast, right? Quality starts to suffer. Things fall out of hands. Without adequate end-to-end testing, plans, these things just fall apart. Quality will suffer, and customers won't get the new applications in their hands they want. So we really need to focus on that. So how do we do that? So if you think about connected enterprise applications, this is the cities analogy. End-to-end business process testing. Basically, someone has to have ownership of the test creation, the maintenance, and the requirements coordination across multiple things, right? We really need to focus on our tests reusable and scalable. Can something we do about functional tests, reuse and continuous integration and continuous testing? We don't want to rebuild things. We want to leverage existing assets as much as possible. And UI version changes and business logic changes have to be validated. It used to be the UI was very dumb with the mainframe. It was a complicated client server. Early web was dumb. Well, we're back to the UI has tons of logic in it. And those UI changes do update your logic. Okay? And then there's also compliancy and audit requirements every time we make a release, and upstream and downstream systems change. So how have we gotten here? Well, we all talked about Agile initially, but if you look at, Scaled Agile Framework version 5, they've moved from just the pipeline to release train to the value stream. They say, yes, we're going to have multiple upgrades at the same time, and it's correlated to the value that the business people are getting. So we're not just thinking about the math of a pipeline now. Scaled Agile Framework has evolved, and that's where I'm seeing my customers evolve also. Of course, there's always the question, how does Worksoft help with this? So obviously, the Worksoft N+1 automation as how people are doing that. We want to test at every stage of the Agile lifecycle, right? In Sprint, we want to have unit or story tests. We basically want to have story level tests. We want to actually look at a story completed, and in many cases, what happens is the last 2 days of it's done, they use Capture, they create the GenDoc, and they say, here, I've done a manual validation of this, I approve it, and so the story is working. Now, what happens is the next sprint comes along and multiple stories turn into features. And this is where it gets really interesting for business people to validate. Because a feature is pay overtime, there may be 7 stories around that. And business people want to see features validated together. And then what happens is we have end-to-end testing that are tied to our epics and features. So we really do feel that there's some in-sprint testing, and then there's an automation sprint where you're taking multiple stories together. You're defining your business requirements for the features, you're looking at your larger epics, and those are being put into your continuous testing lifecycle. So you're leveraging, but you're testing all along the way. So how do you do this? Well, obviously, if you're using a codeless, easy to use tool that's accessible to non-technical team members, it's going to make it a lot easier. And this is where you get into the gray area of, is this actually is it codeless or is it a platform? But so the idea is you need to make sure it's easy to discover what your processes are. You want them to be easy to maintain, easy to scale, and easy to deploy. So the overlap is some people say, is this low code? I say it's codeless, so by definition it must be low code, but we'll leave that debate for another day. Another thing is, how do we actually look at the process of testing itself? And so most people look at the process as a very disconnected, discrete components. They do discovery where they try to take their acceptance criteria and turn them into test cases, and they talk to some business people to say, are these the right test cases? And then there's people who do automation, or they write their manual tests, and then there's robotic process automation on the far end. But in reality, we need to connect the discovery to the automation, and this is where we use Worksoft technology to put into the end user's hands and say, just show me what you do, we'll create the discovery so you get documentation of the process that turns into automated test. Now, a big question is, once you've started putting automation in production, will it break if I do an upgrade of Salesforce, I do an upgrade of Coupa, I do an upgrade of SAP? Well, if my test cases are breaking, that's a pretty good indicator that I've got material changes that my robotic processes will have to be updated. And so we see everything in development before it goes into production. So having some coordination across that makes a lot of sense. And then, of course, the same question in RPA. I need to be able to describe my robotic process or what I want done to the technical people. So we use our discovery technologies to figure out what is the process documented correctly so we can actually do that. So we want to move from a disconnected process to actually one seamless platform. We call it Connective Automation, which is going to allow seamless integration for the full life cycle of a business process from discovery to testing to RPA. We want this to work well together. So just to dive in, so if you think about what you do today, you may have manual discovery. You walk to a whiteboard. Well, we can't do that anymore because of COVID. So we get on conference calls, we talk to business people, and they get tired of talking to us, right? Manual testing takes too much time. It increases implementation because we just can't do it in parallel enough. And for continuous testing to work, we need to think this is a daily event, right? And then, you know, moving manual processes out of production that are very rote and repetitive, things that are error prone, we're just entering data. How do we move away from those? So if we want to break down the silos, automated discovery, obviously there's Worksoft capture and analyze to discover your processes, document them, and show you similarities between them. You've got automated testing with Certify and Execution Manager. Execution Manager is what's going to plug into any of your pipelines like ADO and Jenkins and connect and allow you to run your tests automatically. And then obviously the new Orchestrator is what allows us to do production process automation there. So we're leveraging these things across the Worksoft platform. So the goal is we want to be automated discovery. So we want to have business users do process discovery. We want to automatically generate our documentation and our assets we use for testing and automation. You know, with testing, we find people want to reduce the man hours. So we run instead of running manual tests, when we run them in an automated way, we run them by larger parallel scale. So we cut the time in half. And then testers can focus on the actual failures of tests, not doing the actual tests themselves, higher value. And then for robotic process automation, what we really find is when you do an end-to-end test, you are doing 2 or 3 steps in a large end-to-end test that is a robotic process. Maybe it's setting up your plants, configuring, you know, a plant in SAP, setting up pricing, you know, bill of materials for packaging. There's lots of things that we do as part of an end-to-end test, which technically are robotic processes. So how does this look? So obviously with on process discovery, we want to put this in the hands of the business people to make it easier for them to do their job. And the idea is I'm going to activate Worksoft Capture. They may be in SAP GUI. They may be in the new Fiori apps. Maybe it's a web application like Ariba, a Concur, or your custom applications. And then you may have host emulators and mainframes and AS400s and mobile apps. The idea is you want to be able to allow capture across multiple technologies to see that end-to-end business process and how they work. What this allows us to do is say, capture it, we upload it, the users get the end-to-end documentation so they can see the process. We automatically remove duplicates and say, hey, these are your most popular processes. These are the things you do 10,000 times. So we should actually look at having higher automation versus the things you do 10 times itself. Okay. The nice thing is the output of this exports directly into your automation platform. So with automated testing, you know, Diego pointed out a statistic that we are not increasing over the years on the amount of UI testing. Like our UI automated testing is going down. And this pains me because we have a great solution for that. You know, when we have customers who said, we looked at projects and calculated the spend of our subject matter experts and realized that using Worksoft, we could cut this in half. And we saw that the scenarios would take the user a whole day, we could recreate and redo in 10 minutes. So if we can actually help with this, we'll actually move that statistic. So the idea is we want it to be codeless and easy to use, fast, scalable, DevOps ready, and integrated. From the business perspective, we really want to reduce the number of production defects, we have better user experience. We want our automation levels to be at the 90% level, not at that decreasing levels like Diego's metric shows that the industry is moving to. And we actually want to reduce the amount of time it takes for the project. If we can speed up one part of the project like testing, we can definitely help with that. So obviously, Execution Manager is key to that. So Execution Manager is going to give us centralized monitoring. We're going to accelerate our testing by running it either from our pipelines or maybe we schedule it. You're going to run it from your CI/CD, so that's Jenkins and Bamboo and Azure DevOps. We want to actually take the testing and embrace it inside of the lifecycle itself. So the last area is actually looking at RPA. And so it was interesting. Diego pointed out that 70% of organizations actually have manual or paper processes. So how do we actually help with that? Well, so if we look at RPA for complex business applications, it needs to be seamless. We need to have all the compliancy control and workflow management inside of that to get it to be adopted. And so what we found with our customers who've started doing robotic processes is they said, we're doing this as part of our end-to-end test because we're having to get an Excel spreadsheet and enter the data to set up parts of the applications themselves. So we've got a lot of low-hanging fruit, and this makes sense. You're bringing the orchestrator to put all the security and compliance around that. Okay? So it wouldn't be a testing webinar if I didn't point out that, yeah, Diego said there's going to be some problems in testing your robotic processes. You need to do that. Well, obviously with Worksoft, testing a robotic process cannot be a manual, all hands on deck effort. It just can't happen that way. We use Certify to test Worksoft for years. So we drink our own champagne. Certify can actually test our thick client, we test our browsers, we verify the running of our processes, we do multiple levels of validation to see not only can you author, but they're actually running correctly. So it's a natural evolution for us to actually say, hey, people are doing robotic processes as part of an end-to-end process, and you need to test those with Certify. So yes, technically Certify can test Certify. So I'm going to come over and do a short demo to show how this is different. So if you look, I've got business capture here. So this is the new capture. Visual capture still exists. And so I'm going to log into my SAP Fiori system. So a business person can record, they can take screenshots, they can add comments, they can add named activities. But the core idea is we want them to have something small on the desktop to run, and we want them to do their normal job. So whether you're doing discovery for a test case or doing discovery for robotic process automation, the goal is the same. I want to understand what the user's doing, and then I want to turn that into automation. So I'll type in the order and the data here. And what you'll notice on the right as I'm going to the screens, we'll give you an English narrative of what we're inputting, and we're giving you screenshots. So you can see what's going to be built into the documentation as you would expect. And as I navigate through, it'll see there's different types of controls. It's naming the activities for me automatically. So if you think about business processes or collections of things, it's actually allowing me to see that. So I'll enter my sales, my material for a bike order. So I'm going to order some bike parts. And then what we'll see is I'm going to load this capture up into the system. Okay. So I'll click Save. There we go. So I've completed my process, and I'll stop my recording. So this is all we want the business user to do. They can go back and they can see everything that's put into the system. They can see the screenshots. Normally, I would send it to Analyze. But as a special treat, I'm going to send this to the new RPA orchestrator. So this is available as beta for our existing customers. So I'm going to enter a name and nice description. And I'll click the Save button. So I'll have to go through the single sign-on. So this is a new proper single sign-on system. So I'll log in, and then I'll be prompted to which orchestration project this goes into, and it'll send it up. So I'll come to my orchestrator. There's demo 1. If I edit, I can see it just popped in. So I've sales order 2C. There's the document. So I've now uploaded the capture for automation purposes. But the other thing I've done is I've given this document to the business people so they can actually see, here's the business process diagram, here's the screenshots and all the data. So what we found is by giving an asset to the business people, they're thrilled. They're not just saying, oh, this is a task, you keep bugging me and asking me for information. So obviously what you want to do is you want to move this into robotic process automation. So, you know, you're used to me showing you Jenkins and Execution Manager. What I did is I took that same asset and I've loaded it into the orchestrator. I've already built a robotic process that's run 131 times today already. And so the spy window is letting me monitor the digital worker and see them run the process itself. So this is a new product we've brought out. It's in beta right now, and then we'll be GAing later in the quarter, and we're very excited about this. So you can see the current execution status is executing. The last execution passed at 12:06 p.m. I can see the name of the agent, and you'll see now we're playing back the automation. Looks very similar to what we captured. So the idea is I've really driven this discovery from the end user's perspective. And now let's go through and start entering the sales order. So the idea is the digital worker is doing this work on my behalf. So my capture turned into automation. I've now scheduled it in the orchestrator. So we'll see here the orchestrator will continue its work and it'll log out. And then I have mine set that it pauses for a bit and then looks for more work and kicks off again. So the idea is we want to do automation, but it can have two paths. You could take it to what we traditionally think about testing, but we can also bring it over into robotic process automation. So to kind of recap, continuous automated functional testing brings it all together, right? We improve user experience by validating our end-to-end business processes. We reduce manual process documentation. We ensure higher levels of quality. And we do really think the efficiencies has become, because we're code-free, some people may argue low code, we'll leave that for another day. We think about your bots. You're getting in compliance. They do the same things. They do it without argument 24 hours a day, so you can do more testing. We can really help you enable digital transformations that operate more competitively. And then the machines themselves. We need to eliminate significant business impact events by actually doing more testing. Have the machines do the work for us. We want to shift left and have, as the machines are doing the automated build process for DevOps pipelines, we want our continuous testing to be part of those same life cycles there. Okay, well, thank you for your time, for joining the webinar. And Diego, thank you very much for giving us a really interesting insight into the industry and how the industry is evolving. COVID is changing our workflows and what we're thinking. But I think it's really interesting to think about how automation is pervasive, but continuous testing is still valid across all the different types of automation, even the new chatbots.
Thanks, Kraus. So always fun co-presenting with you. Great, thanks.